the biggest thing that pops into mind is, when I'm working with hockey athletes in particular, I mean, the majority of them say, well, I want to play junior hockey. I want to play college hockey. So they're thinking about something that is so far in the future that they miss the present. And it is the present that is the most important piece. Because if they're not willing to show up every day, if they're not willing to compete their hardest every single day, well, then what they're thinking of in the future.
Well, welcome back to another very special interview of Masters of the Game. And today I get to introduce you to Adrian Veideman. I'm going to give you a little background about Adrian, where he came from, his journey, and then we're going to dive deep into this. I was really fortunate to meet him through George Wozdecki, who, if you haven't listened to that interview, please go back and watch that. A great insight into the mind of a coach at a variety of different levels. And Adrian actually happened to play for Coach Wozdecki back in the day. So let me tell you about Adrian before I welcome him in. Adrian spent 9 years playing professionally in the American Hockey League, East Coast Hockey League, Germany, Austria, and Norway. Side note, we had a blast last week talking about living in Europe, as I've lived in Austria and Switzerland as well. But he led his team to playoff championships in both Austria and Norway. Before turning professional, he was a 4-year letter winner at the University of Denver, playing for Coach Wozdecki, and was part of back-to-back national championship teams in 2004 and 2005, which is just awesome and was heavily celebrated here in the Denver, Colorado area. Now, Adrian actually currently lives here in the Denver area, is an assistant coach for Ballard High School, and is a leading real estate agent and investor today, married with 2 kids. And Adrian, thank you for taking your time. So pumped to dive into hockey and sports and mindset and everything with you today.
No, thank you so much for having me today. It'll be an honor. I'm looking forward to it.
This is great. And I was kind of joking with you when we met last week that I should have just, darn it, put the camera up and hit record, because man, we went deep and everything, just again, sports in Europe and your path and journey and what it's like from, being a coach now as well. But, I always like to start these off, Adrian, with one question. It's this, like, what's one of the, most memorable experiences you had from your playing days?
Oh, geez. I think when I look back at my playing days, I think I always tell people that my time spent at DU, those were the best 4 years of my life, not only as an athlete, but more so just teaching me to become an adult. Time management, dedication to my game, dedication to the sport, just learning how to fend for myself, doing my laundry, eating, just growing up. You kind of get thrown into this program where the expectations are high and you gotta get on board really quick. So those 4 years, although they were difficult at times, they were very satisfying most of the time. So
that's awesome. Is there a game for you that sticks out that you just played really well?
Oh, well, I don't, and I don't remember playing a lot. And it's so funny because I had a gentleman who worked in the National Hockey League for a number of years, sent me a flash drive of our 2 national championship games. This is about 6 months ago. And I had never watched either of those games until he sent me this flash drive. So I sat down and I watched them. And I was blown away with how much I actually played in those games, because those games seem like they go so quickly. I even went to George Wozdecki and told him, what were you thinking? Like, why did you play me so much? I mean, I wasn't getting anything accomplished out there. But yeah, I mean, those were special times, special memories, but, great that we got those victories. But, and then my junior, senior year, we didn't even make the national tournament. So you go from having the highest of highs to kind of the lowest of lows where, well, this is easy. We're going to do this every single year. But then, you fall short for 2 years. So
that's so interesting. Well, and I mean, there's so many questions I have just based on what you said there, but let's back up a little bit, because I want to explain to everyone watching, like, you just a little, give some insight into your journey, right? How you made it, to DU, and then, beyond, and things like that. So, walk me through a little bit, like, what was that journey like to, starting out and getting to, that opportunity at DU? What was your path?
Well, I grew up in a small town in British Columbia, Canada. It was about 2,000 people at that time, a little lake town. So the summers were beautiful, got to do a lot of amazing things. But, being a Canadian kid, you play hockey, right? That's what you do. Picked it up at a really young age. My youth hockey experience was incredible. We typically had 10 skaters and one goalie. So, you're getting repetition. You're almost forced to become a good hockey player, because we just don't have that many kids in a small town to do that. Played my youth hockey days in Sycamoose, BC. When I got to my high school years, I was a good player. I was selected to play on Team British Columbia and team, some pretty highly touted teams at that time. But I didn't have a very good experience with my coach my senior year of high school. I wasn't getting attention from junior hockey teams. I wasn't getting, I was 5'10", 130 pounds. I wasn't a big, robust kid at those times. And during that time, it was, you had to play in the Western Hockey League if you were anybody, right? But my size really hampered me. That's what I was told by junior hockey teams, by scouts, by all these different higher level teams. So, I played my senior year of high school. I played junior B locally. And I just had a coach that, tore me down, I wasn't getting the opportunity. I wasn't treated as an equal on that team. And it really drove me away from the game. I worked hard on my game. I would go to school in the morning, and on my lunch break, I would run over to the rink so I could skate for 45 minutes. And then I'd run back to school. And then I'd go to practice in the evenings, or I was playing hockey at home after school. So my dedication to the game was there. It was definitely there. It was, I just wasn't getting the exposure that I wanted. And then, I was involved with a coach that just really, he didn't appreciate what I was all about. I was never a player or a kid that would talk back. I was always listening. I was dedicated to what the coach was saying. I was involved in practice. There was no, I was a pretty straight edge type of kid. Not getting the respect, if you will, really drove me away from the game. I told my mom and dad that I didn't want to play anymore past high school. I had enrolled at Mount Royal College in Calgary, and I had essentially quit the game. I didn't train at all that summer. In about a week or two before I was set to pack up and go to be a full-time college student and not play the game of hockey anymore, I received a phone call from Gary Davidson, who's now general manager of the Calgary Hitmen in the WHL. But at that time, he was starting a new BCHL franchise in Salmon Arm, which was 20 minutes away from where I grew up. He had called me and explained to me that, and he just said, "Hey, I know you're not planning on playing next year, but we have tryouts next year. We'd love for you to just come out and so we can take a look at you." So I had agreed to come out, even though, they knew and I knew and my parents knew that we were planning to go to school in a couple of weeks. I had went to camp, and after the second day, they offered me a spot on the team. And I guess you could say that kind of the rest is history as far as my life trajectory. But
well, I want to dive into this a little bit. First of all, when you look at that senior year coach, right? I'm just curious. You don't give specifics, but like, how did that coach interact with you that led you to kind of go down this path of like, I really don't want to be here. I want nothing to do with this game anymore. Because I think it's important to talk about some of this stuff. I know there's coaches watching too.
Well,
how we interact.
When I think about the timing of all this and the era of hockey and the nature of hockey, it was still very much it was a very masculine sport. It was a very rough and tumble sport. And I didn't really check all those boxes. I was more of a finesse player. I didn't like the physical nature of the game at that time. I didn't have the body for it. And this specific individual's coaching style, he coached one way, and that was a yeller and a screamer, and his way or the highway. There was no collaboration with his players. Everything was the exact same every day. There was no innovation. It was hard for him to motivate. It was hard for him to encourage and, give pats on the back and say nice job. So it was he didn't fit the style of coaching that I needed,
Yes. Well, I think that's huge. I talked a little about this last week too, right? But I think the number one challenge for coaches is motivating athletes, right? So, in typical situations, if you're a hockey coach, in theory, you know the X's and O's and systems and all those things that go into like positioning, all that sort of stuff, right? You know the game.
Yeah.
It's now, how do you take that and motivate the athletes to do those sorts of things, right? And recognize when some players need something different, right? Yeah. And that takes time. So I think that's a interesting comment to kind of dive into. And I'm curious, you take the summer off, you're moving on with your life, and then you go out for those 2 days of tryouts or the week of tryouts, and then you're offered, on the second day. Was your mindset like different going into that? Was it super laid back? Like, what was that like?
I hadn't trained all summer. I was used to doing things in the summer. I spent my summer working, trying to earn some money so I could help fund my college and all that. I just remember stepping on the ice and I was like, oh crap, I haven't been on the ice in a while. So I'm kind of really nervous about this because it'd been a few months since I had stepped on the ice. And just the pace of the game was obviously quicker because it's a higher level, and you throw that in the mix. And I just remember thinking after the first session that morning, I was like, oh, well, first of all, I'm completely exhausted because I'm not in shape.
Yes.
But I felt optimistic about I can play with these guys knowing that I haven't trained all summer. These guys have, knowing that I could make an impact on that team. So that was a positive for me.
Yes.
And obviously the coaching staff and the general manager, who I'm, still close with to this day, giving me that opportunity, changed my life.
Yes. Well, I imagine you grew a little bit.
Well, no. I mean, I had been, by my second year of junior hockey, I was 6'1", 6'1.5", 150 pounds. That was the height and weight I came in when I played at DU. I came in at DU at 6'1", 150 pounds. I left at 6'1", 175 pounds. So 4 years, I gained 25 pounds. Over my career, that was always my biggest detriment. I could not keep on pounds. I couldn't get that weight up. It wasn't until, I'm 40, I just turned 41, and I'm at 198 pounds. Like I've never crossed that 200 pound threshold in my life. So I don't know if it's genetics or whatever. It certainly wasn't a lack of effort in the gym or anything like that. That's just, what God had given me to work with,
Yes.
So
that's so wild. And I love, I don't know, I just love the story because it's like everyone's path to the, professional league or to college or whatever is different. Yeah. And hockey's unique in that way, that there can be multiple paths to like the next level. Right. Yeah. And I find that fascinating. I don't think there's a lot of sports like that necessarily, at least US based, right? And over in Europe, I think there's different paths, but for different sports, but it's really, really interesting. And, so you go to DU and you get picked up, and what was that transition like? Like, what's the biggest difference between, playing juniors at that time and then making the transition to a really good team? Like, cause you said to your like earlier point, like you won 2 national championships, like back to back.
Yeah.
Your freshman and sophomore year. What was that transition like?
Well, I mean, I always tell people the biggest jump I ever made was from junior hockey to college, without a doubt. I mean, the transition from college hockey to pro hockey was far more easier for me because I was much more of a cerebral player than I was a physical dominating force.
Yes.
My mind on the ice played a lot bigger role for me than my physical abilities.
Yes.
But jumping into the college game, the speed and the physicality of which it was played was insane. And it was, you played 2 games a week, but the games weren't hard because the practices were harder than the games because of how intense they were and how many players were on the ice fighting to get in the lineup. And, there was fights in practice, and there was, it was far more intense practicing than the games ever were.
Really?
And I think that's kind of a testament to George and his coaching staff at the time that we had at DU. And we still use that mindset at the high school level coaching these kids, where we want our practices to be harder than the games, just because that's where you truly make your strides is in practice, and the test is the games, right? To see if you've improved. So
is there an example like of how practice was run like at DU? Can you give me some insight and some of the people watching of like what it was like? Because I think I experienced that too from a baseball perspective, right? When you go from high school to college, and my coach, there was this intensity about it, and there was a schedule. Like it was like, even in baseball, we had 2-minute drills, 3-minute drills, and like the expectation was get your stuff done, do it right. But the level of like sweat that was pouring off of me was way greater in the college. But give me some insight into that.
I wouldn't say that the practices were out of the norm. Now, the practices became very intense when the games didn't go well that previous weekend. So, you play Friday, Saturday, you get your Sunday off. And if you didn't perform or you didn't do well on those Friday and Saturday, you knew that Monday was going to be a real challenge. Whether it was, on the ice, George is famous for, we called it the tug of war drill, where, he puts out a massive tug of war rope in the end zone. And it's basically full on wrestling within this confined area, but other than that drill, and then obviously we skated a ton. We did a ton of conditioning drills on the ice. But other than those things, George was very adamant about our structure, about how we played the game as a team, how we communicated on the ice, things like that. I mean, I just remember the hardest times and the most blood, sweat, and tears put into it at DU. It wasn't even on the ice. It was off the ice. We would do these things. The assistant coaches called them Saturday challenges, right? Big thing in the off season. And they would just say, meet at South High School at 9 a.m. So it's going to be tough, and you show up and there's 45-pound weights sitting on the track at South High School, and you are given a partner, one of your teammates, and you guys have to run a mile with this 45-pound weight in under 10 minutes, and there's guys throwing up, there's guys not finishing, there's guys, it's a human experiment is what it was. But you didn't want to let your teammates down. You didn't want to be the guy that didn't finish because he wasn't athletically able to, and then if you did finish and your teammates didn't finish, well, you better get your ass back there and help your teammates get across that line. So there was a lot more of a team dynamic involved in these things than just strictly being a hockey player. I mean, we built teams there. And they still do to this day, which is what has created that much success there. We never had the most skilled teams in the country, but we had the right players to create the best teams, if that makes sense.
That makes sense. And it's interesting. I always love asking this question, right? In your mind, when you look back at those teams, especially at DU, maybe some of the pro teams too, right? So when you're winning, the championships in Austria and Norway, is it all about the players that you recruit? Like they already have to have the right mindset coming in, or can you get players who are more, call it individualistic, right, in thinking, and make them become a great team player? What's your kind of opinion and experience with that?
I've always, and I've never been one of the best players on my team. I've always been kind of in the middle. I've had some skill, I've had some grit, some leadership, so I've never been one of these highly touted type of player. So I've always considered myself an underdog, when it comes to these things. But I've always found that the more selfish individuals you have, the further you are from winning anything, because it's always the selfishness that is brought to the forefront with your teammates. And everybody knows it. It's no secret. So the more team players you can bring into the mix, the more sacrificing talent for more commitment to winning will go way further in a team sport than, you look at programs like Michigan, just as an example. They're always notorious for having high draft picks in their hockey program. Well, these kids are going to be there for 1 year or 2 years max, and then they're going to turn pro. So the turnover, they don't have the opportunity to create a 4-year bond with these athletes. They just turn them and burn them. Well, look, we've got this first round pick and this second round pick, and this kid played there, and look how many points you have. Which drives me absolutely nuts when ESPN is broadcasting a national championship game against DU where we don't have those types of players, but we have an actual hockey team that is going to do much better in those high intense moments on the ice because they've been there for 4 years together. Well, now they're seniors together, and they're just a tight-knit group that can work through those adverse moments.
Yes. And I think to your point sounds like there's a healthy competition that happens, if I can label it healthy. Yeah. Maybe sometimes unhealthy, I guess.
And it's not like that anymore. It's not even close to that anymore with the college landscape and the NIL stuff and all this stuff that's out there. I mean, goodness gracious, I couldn't even imagine them doing some of the stuff that we did back in the day. I mean, there might be lawsuits, to be honest with you.
Right. But I love even to your point of, intentionally setting up drills, practices, things like that, where there is that team element, right? Where you kind of, I don't want to say ride or die, right? But together, or succeed or fail together. But there is that like mentality of placing people together. Yeah. Whether it's a tug of war rope or certain drills or things like that, where it's like, there's an accountability to your teammate, and the expectation is you help your teammate if we're not succeeding in this area, right? Or if they need help. And I think that's a critical part to, it can be frustrating, right? If you're waiting on someone, but it's also what an opportunity to build up your team together. Yeah. Love that.
Yeah. So that, I mean, they did it there. And when I think, you appreciate it more when you become older, you appreciate the people that came before you more and you even more so, you see through the lines a little bit more. And well, okay, there was a method to this madness that we were involved with at that time.
Yes. Yeah, my college coach calls it like the 25-year wake-up call,
Yeah.
where when his players turn 25, he starts receiving phone calls, and they'll say to the coach, like, I finally understand why we did the things the way we did, right? In the moment, it's hard to see as a player sometimes. So the madness as it is.
Yeah.
That's so interesting. Who's one of the best teammates you had at college level, pro level, whatever? Who's one of the best teammates you had, best leaders that you had? And what was so unique about that person that makes you answer that name?
Oh, when I think of my college career, I think of somebody like Kevin Yolansky, who I was a teammate with for 2 years. And again, now that I've had 20 years to think back on this, the reason why Kevin was a leader to me, and not only because we were roommates on the road, but Kevin was a father at that time at DU. He was a father. He had a 4 or 5 year old. She was probably 4 or 5 years old at the time.
Wow. Yes.
And at that time, when you're in the moment, you're like, okay, well, why is this guy so reserved? Why is he, on the ice? He was a great player. He was a quiet guy off the ice a little bit, but now you think back on it and you're like, well, the responsibility this guy had off the ice was not even close to what we had at that time.
Yes.
So he was able to take care of his business at the rink. He was able to take care of his business away from the rink. So, somebody like that. But then when I transitioned to pro, it was kind of the same thing for me. It was the guys that I looked up to. They were fathers off the ice. I think of a guy like Curtis Murphy, who played at North Dakota for 4 years, incredible college player. He played before I did. He was a 9-time American League All-Star in the American Hockey League. He got the opportunity to play one NHL game. Now, this is a guy that, had he been 10 years later, he would have had a 15-year NHL career, without a doubt. So Curtis and I played together in Linz, Austria. He had 4 kids at the time.
Wow.
We called Curtis at the rink, his name was Dad. We called him Dad. But just an incredible player, an incredible father, an incredible person. So I was attracted to a lot of players that I played with like that. They were older than I was, and they were also in a different time in their lives.
Yes.
I always say my biggest regret is not having a family with me when I played in Europe, and we talked about that last week. But I don't know why. It was maybe because I wanted to be a father. I wanted what they didn't have, but I saw how they were just so mature in everything that they did.
Did they bring because of that, did they have a different kind of intentionality with their time, their focus? Just
very
because
much.
they had to?
Yeah, very much so. And I think it was because, well, I've got, in Curtis's situation, I got 5 mouths to feed here, right?
Yes.
So I've got when I'm at the rink, I am so dialed into what I'm doing, and I'm so intentional about what I'm doing that, because I only have my 3 or 4 hours at the rink, and then I've got to turn the switch, and now I'm a father. I'm a husband at home. So it was just it was eye-opening to me, but it was really beautiful to watch with a lot of these guys that had families over there.
Yes. Well, you reminded me of this quote, and I'm looking down at it. I've written on one of my whiteboards here, but the quote is this, and I have no idea who said it, but it says, "The trouble is you think you have time."
Yep. Yeah.
And I think when you look at athletics, right, we're going through high school, collegiate, pro level, if you get those opportunities, right, that sometimes we take that time for granted, we got time. Mm-hmm. And then situations happen where, again, you enter a family, enter some situation where you got to move teams or contracts, re-upped or not re-upped.
Yeah.
and you got to figure it out and like take advantage of the time that you have, that focus.
Yeah.
Like every practice, every game, every weight session, every off the ice moment. I think it's, at least in the past, I felt like I was good, but there's times where I don't have any regrets, of course, but like I knew I took it for granted, the time, because I felt I had more.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. I felt like I could have played longer than I did. I was just at a time where I was starting a family, and I didn't want to be much older and starting a new career knowing that I had to do so at some point,
Yes, totally. Well, and so let's talk about that transition to, professional hockey, right? And you have such a cool, path and journey through AHL, the ECHL to, again, Germany, Austria, Norway. When you look at that, type of player from like a collegiate level to a professional level, did you have to handle yourself differently? Did you see those guys handle themselves differently kind of at that level outside of like, even the guys with families, things like that? But was it a significant shift, small shift? Like, what was that like, that transition?
It was a eye-opening shift. And it was something that I struggled with every single day. And that is because I was raised, it was ingrained in my bones that I was a team first player. And you turn professional, and I just felt like everybody was so fake about the team aspect, and they were so selfish about the me. How do I get to the next level? How do I distance myself from my teammate to make myself look better so that the management at the NHL level notices me so I get a shot? That kind of mentality.
Yes.
I was not undrafted player, so turning pro, I'm at NHL camps with 6th round draft picks, 7th round, 1st round, current NHL guys. And, and I'm there, and I know I'm a good judge of myself. I can say that I'm better than this guy. I'm better than that guy. I'm better than their 4th round pick. But that meant nothing to anybody. Because this guy had a 6th round draft pick tag on him. He's going to get more opportunity than me no matter what. So that was a very hard thing for me to get over. For example, my 2nd year professional, I'm playing in Iowa in the American Hockey League, practicing every day, proving myself every day. I'm better than a lot of these guys. I really am. And I truly believe that to this day. But I'm in the stands for the first 6 weeks of the year because their 7th round pick needs to play, because their 6th round pick needs to play. So that was a real challenge for me, trying to keep a positive attitude, keep trying to be a good teammate, just knowing that, well, there's nothing really I can do about this other than show up every day at practice and work as hard as I can,
So I think you just answered the question, right? How did you work through that? Because I don't care what level you play at. You could be a high school player, college player. It doesn't matter. But we all face those things where we're frustrated, and maybe it's not playing time. Maybe we think we should get more. Maybe we feel like we should be getting, we should be on power play, right? Or penalty kill. And these other guys are like, why? And we can lead this down this really fast negative path, right? Yeah. At least that's me. Yeah. Maybe no one else. But how did you mentally work through that to stay like focused and locked in and go to use your words, like show up to the rink and do your best every day? Like, how did you do that?
I tried not to change who I was. I enjoyed being in the locker room. I enjoyed the camaraderie that came with being a hockey player. And I enjoyed my teammates as everybody should have. The way I think I handled it best was actually on the ice where, not only am I not in a spot where I think I should be, but I'm not getting the opportunity. So one of the avenues that I found was, in practice, when we practice power play, well, I'm an automatic penalty killer because I don't, I'm just out there as a warm body to try to get the power play some looks. Well, I took it to a level where I'm like, screw these guys. Like, I'm going to go as hard as I can, and I'm not going to let them score. Typically, when you practice power play, you want the power play to make plays and feel good and score some goals so that heading into the game, they've got a good mindset. Well, I said, screw that. Like, I'm here to compete for a job too. Like, I want to keep a job. I want my next contract. So being a jerk in that situation in practice, it helped the power play more than I think they wanted to know at the time, but also gave me some more determination to get better and get my teammates better at the same time. Yes. That makes sense.
So that's the key. I think that's where I see a lot of gaps, where it's like that word selfish. Like we have to become selfish at a point, right? I don't care if you're a mom or dad or athlete or whatever. It's like, and some people are like, oh, hell yeah, let's do it, right? And then, but others are like, ooh, but I don't like that, right? Because I am about the team. I am about like developing others and things like that, right? Or it feels weird to be selfish, right? But when you think about that, right, here's the key, what I picked up, and I want people to hear this. You made a choice that on the penalty kill in that case of practice, that you are going to elevate your performance. Why? Because it's going to make not only you better, but it's also going to improve the power play, because now they got to work in a game time, like at game time speed with you coming at them, which is going to help translate to make the team more successful. And you use those words, and I think sometimes we say like, it's like, well, it is about me, it has to become about me. And it's no, like improve yourself, elevate your performance, because by default, it's going to make everyone else around you better. Mm-hmm. To help the team win. I think sometimes we lose that to help the team win.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's like, that's why you're being selfish, to help others win.
Yeah.
And make the team successful, which is in alignment with who you are.
Right. Right.
And I can't tell you, you remind me of like so many interviews I've done too, where the individuals, the best athletes, and I'm talking to one right now, understand that we have to approach practice and games to maximize our abilities to give the team the best chance to win. And I hear that over and over again, Adrian. You just said it again. It's like one of those themes that, but if we stop at like, well, I'm just here to improve myself, so I get the next contract, I do that. Yeah, that's an important piece. But we all know that if you're on a winning team, good Lord, like the opportunities are way better.
Yeah. Oh,
individually too. Yeah. So
yeah.
Not in all cases, but a lot.
You and I know that, but don't tell that to high school kids, right?
Correct. Yeah, right.
Yeah.
I think that's such an important thing. And coaches listening or watching right now, I urge you to like tell the story about Adrian, because this is like such a key, like called a secret to success. It's not really a secret. We know it, but it's like telling the story of like, this is what gets people to the next level. It's this type of stuff. And you repeat it over and over and over again with Olympians, pro athletes. Same thing over and over. It's incredible.
Yeah.
So I want to ask you this question, Adrian, because we're talking to, high school athletes, collegiate athletes, like even pro athletes, right? Everybody's trying to get like, how do I get the next opportunity and continue to, elongate my career and do all those things. What advice would you give, a high school athlete who's looking to go to the juniors or to the collegiate level? Or what advice would you give like a college player, looking to get to the professional level? Like what advice would you give them to set them up for success? Like what does it take to get there?
Well, I think the biggest thing that pops into mind is, when I'm working with hockey athletes in particular, I mean, the majority of them say, well, I want to play junior hockey. I want to play college hockey. So they're thinking about something that is so far in the future that they miss the present. And it is the present that is the most important piece. Because if they're not willing to show up every day, if they're not willing to compete their hardest every single day, well, then what they're thinking of in the future is irrelevant because they're never going to get there. And that's our biggest battle is that motivation piece. It's the dedication piece. If you're not a self-motivated, or you don't have the ability to motivate yourself to become a better athlete, a better student, a better person, then what your goals are really they're not going to come into play, or they're not going to come into fruition, because you're just so farsighted on what actually needs to happen in order for that goal to become reality. Does that make sense? We just have such a difficult time in all aspects, and I have a difficult time now of staying motivated on a day-to-day. So do you. There's days where you don't want to go to work. There's days where I don't want to go to work. But if you want something bad enough and you're willing to put in the work, it's the stuff that nobody sees that's the most important. And that's practice. That's okay. Well, I'm never going to miss a gym workout because that's super important. I'm going to eat healthy. I'm going to make sure my grade levels where it needs to be. It's going to be, I'm going to try to excel in every aspect of my life. And there's just such big gaps in a lot of these athletes' lives.
I couldn't say any better. It's, to your point, it's like the daily things, especially the stuff that people don't see.
Yeah.
Right. Because that's where we can take a day off, a moment off. Right. And yeah, I think it's so key that you point out too, Adrian, that like there's some days where sometimes you don't feel like doing it.
Yeah.
There were some days I didn't want to go to practice. There were some days I didn't want to get up and go to the game.
Yeah.
And maybe that was because I wasn't playing, or maybe it was because I was playing.
Yeah.
I don't know. Maybe I was in a slump. I wasn't playing well. Like, it's the last thing I want to do. But to understand that, I love that aspect of like with this visual that popped in my head was almost like, our heads down, we're working, and everyone like staying in the present, doing the work. And then every so often we glance up, like from the desk, if you will, or from where we're at, and be like, oh yeah, that's still the goal.
Yeah.
That's still the goal. That's where I'm marching. But I got to put my head back down and do the stuff, even when I don't feel like it.
Yeah.
I think that's so critical.
Yeah.
This is good. Okay. I know I always try to be aware of time, Adrian. I know you got stuff to do. Family and work and coaching and all that sort of stuff. Last kind of question for you. If people want to connect with you and kind of see what you're up to, social media, website, whatever, like how can they best connect with you?
Well, I mean, you can just Google my name and my contact information will pop up. You can reach out to me on Instagram at Veideman_real estate. I'm on Instagram. Happy to talk sports, life, anything with people. And I'm also on Twitter at Veeds. I appreciate you having me on and taking the time to kind of hear my story. We could probably talk for another 3 hours if you wanted. But I want everybody to understand that it takes a lot to be an athlete. I'm super proud of my career. Although I didn't get to the very top, I'm very proud of the things that athletics gave me and the opportunities that it provided. So
it's huge. And I can't thank you enough as well. And, we'll have to, when we were talking last week, I feel like it'd be a fun little session one day to get a bunch of hockey players and coaches together and do this with a variety of different sports, but have like storytelling time and just, again, specific topics to tell stories. I think it'd be a blast. But I can't thank you enough as well. And to quickly wrap this up today for those of you watching and listening, first of all, thank you. Thank you for taking your time. Listen, one thing I've also noticed about athletes is that the ones who make it to the highest levels take the time to develop themselves. And part of developing yourself is to watch a video like this. And I know it's 45 minutes, but they take the time because the lessons we learn, right? It's learn from those who've gone before us so we can accelerate our progress, accelerate our growth. And that's why, Adrian, I'm so thankful to have you on this. And I want to encourage all the people watching, listening, go share this, please subscribe to the channel, but let people know about this episode. If you have a hockey player, that needs to hear this. If you know of a cocky coach who needs to hear this today, please share it with all those around you. So thank you again for your time. Thank you, Adrian, and everyone. Hey, we'll see you on the next interview.
Thanks, Matt.